الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله ارسله الله تعالى بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا وصلى الله عليه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. يقول الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم بعد أن نقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His guidance and His forgiveness. We seek protection of Allah from the malice of our own souls and from the evil of our actions. Whom Allah guides, no one can lead him astray, and whom He goes astray, no one can lead him back to the right path. They witness that there is no deity except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by Himself and no association with Him. And that they witness that Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, is the slave and the messenger of Allah. O who you believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and do not die except upon being believers. O you who believe, fear Allah, and always say the truth, and so that He may make your conduct whole and sound and forgive your sins, and so that you may obey Him. Dear brothers and sisters, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the ni'am, for the blessings, and for health, for wealth, and for allowing us to gather here on the blessed day of Friday. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our families, for our houses, for our cars, for all the ni'am that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings us every single week. For the fact that we woke up this morning in it of itself is a blessing. And so today's khutbah inshallah is about the concept or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's inclusiveness to all mankind. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that you, O Messenger of Allah, you Muhammad, have been sent out with the most upright and the best conduct and the best manners. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, peace and blessings upon him, he says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that I have been sent down to perfect manners. SubhanAllah, the reason why I chose this topic is because oftentimes when we become religious, when we start learning more about our deen, when we start becoming a little bit more knowledgeable, يعني من زادك عليك بالعلم زادك عليك بالدين, right? Whoever goes upon you or goes above you in knowledge, then he goes above you in iman, in faith as well. But SubhanAllah, that what happens usually is when we become students of knowledge, we have a little bit of a tough exterior. We start becoming the know-it-all. We start becoming preachers. And SubhanAllah, the biggest ayah that humbles anybody is أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. That the person who has knowledge, right? أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ, you preach to people, وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ, and you have knowledge and you have this wisdom and this knowledge of the deen, and you don't practically implement what you teach and what you won't practice, right? So this is the reason why he chose manners, is because the Prophet ﷺ was sent down to perfect this manners. And so when we get more knowledgeable, we often become more hasty. We become rough with people. We become unkind with people. We become more judgmental with others, right? And of course, I'm saying, alhamdulillah, mashallah, tabarakallah, you guys are doing beautiful work. It's supposed to be a organization of inclusiveness, right? And this is a beautiful event where we are, of course, bringing other peoples of different faiths together, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nas, right? O people. And He doesn't say, O Muslims. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. We have created you from male and female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا. We made you tribes and nations, so that you may do what? So that you may get to know one another. And this is, if this event is not an embodiment of that, then mashallah, I don't know what it is, subhanAllah. So the reason why I'm speaking about manners and the inclusiveness of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is because oftentimes we hear about Umar ibn Khattab, we hear about the likes of Umar, we hear about the likes of Abu Bakr, right? The one who was most generous and used to give all of his wealth. But we don't often hear about companions that were misfits of the community. And what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do, peace and blessings upon him, when he used to speak to you, he used to align his position and completely speak to you. And what he made he made every single person of his ummah feel special. And he had that special power to do that, right? Because you would think that a man who was a prophet was too busy for people, who were misfits of the community, but he wasn't. He made every person feel special. He made every person feel wanted, and he made every person feel important as well. We have the examples of Abdullah ibn Maktoum, the blind companion, right? Who when the Prophet ﷺ was giving da'wah to those in Quraysh, the tribe of Quraysh, the elites of Quraysh, because remember, back in the day, right, just like nowadays in the society, what we see is what's important. Your worth is dependent upon where you came from, what family you came from, right? What kind of wealth you have, what kind of house you have, what kind of car you drive. These are all determinants of self-worth. And back in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was kind of the same thing. It was all about your family name. It was about your lineage. It was about the money that you had. Are you a Hashim? Are you part of Quraysh? Are you not part of Quraysh? Right? So you had, ranking systems of how, everybody perceived you as. But even prior to prophethood, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was known as As-Sadiq al-Amin, the one who was truthful in his word and also trustworthy. To the point, again, it's describing his mannerisms, describing his perfect mannerisms. That even before prophethood, he was a good person. That even his enemies of Quraysh, who forsake him from his own city, who banished him from their own city, who went to war with him, right? They used to trust him with their belongings. They used to trust him with their wealth, even. And even there was a time that the Prophet ﷺ used to go to the Quraysh and he told them, if I told you there was an army behind the mountain, would you believe me? Of course you believe me. As-Sadiq al-Amin, one who's trustworthy, one who's truthful in their word. Well then, if I told you that there is a day of judgment, if I told you that to worship nothing but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will you believe me then? And then that's when the arrogance came and they would not believe him. So again, this is describing how the Prophet ﷺ used to be with Quraysh. So one time he's talking to the elites of Quraysh, right? And Abdullah ibn Maktoum, a blind companion, he doesn't know what's really going on, so he interrupts him and he tells the Prophet, teach me from what your Lord has taught you. And subhanAllah, there were times, unlimited times, the Prophet used to have with Quraysh in order to preach and to give da'wah to them, in order to bring them to Islam. And this was a moment of, lapse, a moment of lapse where he frowned, where he just literally just moved his eyebrows from one position to another. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set down a whole 3 ayat, right? Telling the Prophet Muhammad that you are abasa wa tawalla an ja'ahu al-a'ma wa ma yudrika la'allahu yazakka, right? That came out, you frown upon a blind man, but this is not what your stature is with people. You are a man who is a perfection. You're a man with perfect manners. And so you should not be, what do you think that this blind man isn't deserving of your da'wah? Just as much as, a person of the elite of Quraysh. How do you know that this blind man wasn't going to be, right, guided by what you have to say? And you know how, even though, subhanAllah, he was blind, but his heart was open to the truth. His heart was open to Islam, right? And these elites of Quraysh, they battled with the Prophet until the day, until the wars and everything, and he still didn't accept Islam, even though miracles happened in front of them. And so you had a blind companion. You had people like Ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu. We know Ibn Mas'ud. He was a man who transmitted many ahadith. There isn't a single hadith, or there are many ahadith that isn't transmitted by Ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu. He was known, one day he's walking to get the siwak, right, the brush for the Prophet ﷺ, and the wind blows him onto the olive tree, onto the tree that has, this toothbrushes, right? And so during that process, his legs are exposed. And the companions, they start laughing at him. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reaffirming what it means to have worth, right? Reaffirming what it means to have akhlaq. Reaffirming that it's not about the status, it's not about the appearance, right? That he tells them, what are you guys talking about? He says, oh Rasulullah, Messenger of Allah, his legs are so skinny, right? And they're laughing at him. And he said, but you don't understand that these two legs will be as heavy as mountain of Uhud, will be as heavy in good deeds on a scale that actually matters on the day of judgment, right? Again, he's reframing the way that they look at other people, right? The way that they always practice with this hierarchy of wealth, right? Because it doesn't matter. Islam does not distinguish between the language that you speak, between how much wealth you have, between what car you drive. It doesn't matter, right? Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That you are raised, and the way that you're ranking with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by your taqwa, by your God consciousness of Allah. This is how you rank in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The most beloved of you is the one who is near, right? The one who is righteous in their work, the one who is righteous in their path, who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who fears the punishment of Allah, and does what is told, what is permissible, and stays away from what is prohibited. Again, we see an example again of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's inclusiveness with people who are misfits. Zahab ibn Haram radiallahu anhu was a man who was described as Daneem, one who was disfigured in the face, and he was also asir, he was also short. And one day he's selling things in the marketplace, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he goes behind him, and again, look how the Prophet is treating every single citizen and how they're important to him. And he teases him and jokes with him. And he goes behind him and says, Man yashtari hadha al-abd? Man yashtari hadha al-abd? Who's going to buy this slave of mine? Who's going to buy this slave of mine? Teasing him, right? And so, subhanAllah, look at the companion Zahab, radiallahu anhu. He actually says something that degrades his own self because he didn't have this worth. And he didn't understand, right? First, initially, he wants to see who's grabbing him from behind, and he sees that the Prophet his skin is so smooth as described, right? And so he lets him hold on to him a little bit more, but then he turns around to him and he says, even if I was a slave, Ya Rasulullah, you would find me worthless, right? You would find me to be no use. And Prophet again reaffirming, uplifting every single person in his community. What does he tell him? That you, Zahab, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are expensive. You are valuable. Right? And so this again reaffirming how each person, even though he was a misfit of the community and people didn't notice him as much, right? But he reaffirmed that inclusiveness. And that matters that you should have with all people. We have another example of Julaybib, radiallahu anhu. Julaybib is a man who was described as Dameem, as again disfigured in his face, waqasir, and he was very short, almost dwarf-like. And he was also poor, wafaqir, and he didn't have much money. Aslan, we don't even know Julaybib bin what. We don't even know where he comes from, where his lineage is. So we know that he didn't really have a place in Mecca. He didn't really have a place amongst the elites of Quraysh or even the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Again, we know about the Abu Bakrs, we know about Ahmad Alsardary, but we don't know much about Julaybib. One day Julaybib, he goes to the Prophet of Allah and he asks him, Ya Rasulullah, will I only get married in the Akhirah? Will I only, get married in the day, or, am I allowed to go to the end, in Jannah, in paradise? What is he trying to indicate to him? That he wants to get married, right, in this dunya as well. So the Prophet ﷺ, he tells him to go to that family. There's a righteous, woman. Go ask her father for her hand. And so he goes and asks. He knocks on the door, and the father answers. And he says in Arabic, he says, "Inni uridu an azawwiju bintak." I would like to marry your daughter. Sometimes also in Arabic it can also mean that I would like to marry off your daughter. Right? So he tells him, I would like to marry your daughter. And he tells him, I have to, again, Julaybib is known in society as a man who has no lineage, has no wealth, has no nothing. And so he said, I have to speak to her mother. And so he actually gets denied right away after saying that. The Prophet Muhammad then goes on behalf of Julaybib. Look how important, even though it's like a president going on behalf of any normal folks like us to a family. And he goes and tells him, Inni uridu azawju bintak. Knocks on the door, and the father answers, what a great honor, Ya Rasulullah. I would like to, and he tells him, I would like to marry your daughter. Or it means, I would like to marry off your daughter. And so he says, Allahu Akbar, God is great. What a great honor for you to be proposing to our daughter. Of course. He says, no, I would like to marry her to Julaybib. And what does he say? He says, I have to speak to her mother. And so he goes to her mother, and he tells him, the Prophet of Allah would like to marry off our daughter, or would like to marry off her daughter to Julaybib. And even initially, before saying Julaybib, the wife is very ecstatic. She says, oh my God, this is a great honor. And he said, no, not to him. And okay, then to who? To Umar, Ali, Uthman. Who's going to marry our daughter? He says, no, Julaybib. And then she says something that's actually almost, borderline haram. He says, haram to say. He says, La amrullahi la uzawwiju. By the years of Allah, of course it's haram for you to swear by the years of Allah, I will never marry her off to Julaybib. So all this is happening while the Prophet ﷺ is at the door. And then the daughter comes down, and she says, what's the commotion? He says, he wants to marry you off to Julaybib, and we will never allow that to happen. Right? And he says, and the woman, look at the God consciousness of her. Look at how mutawali'ah, look how genuine she is. She says, I will marry nobody but Julaybib. If it came from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if it came from the messenger of Allah, I will marry him. And subhanAllah, they end up getting married, and Julaybib actually goes into battle one day, and he dies as a martyr. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, usually after a battle, they go and search for bodies. And so they're going to search for bodies. And the Prophet is asking, Inni afkutu, are you lost? Are you losing anybody? I'm losing this person, I'm losing that person. And then he says, وَلَكِنِّي إِنِّي أَفْقِدُ جُلَيْبِيبَ. Look at how important he made him, right? That even in battle, after the battle, he's looking for the body of Julaybib, nobody else. As if it's his own family. And so eventually he finds Julaybib under 7 soldiers. And he brings the people and he tells them, قُتِلَ سَبْعَ قَبْلَ أَنْ قُتِلَ. He killed 7 people before he was killed, right? And then he points and he holds him. Remember, Julaybib was short as a dwarf. And he says, هَذَا مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْهُ هَذَا مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْهُ هَذَا مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْهُ. He is from me and I am from him. He is from me and I am from him. He is from me and I am from him. Again, re-emphasizing that just because you all might see him as a disfigured, short man, he is elevated in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم من نساء المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Make dua amongst yourselves and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. My dear brothers and sisters, as we spoke about the mannerisms of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do we learn then as a result of these stories? We learn that we need to be, inclusive people as well. We need to be an inclusive organization. We need to be inclusive to people who are less in status, right? Because oftentimes, people with disabilities, individuals who, are often, stranded or often isolated in society. But alhamdulillah, even in Masajid now we have Muhsin, who, is an organization that, is providing a place for people with, individuals with disabilities, like people who have autism, people who are in wheelchairs, who can still participate in the Masajid and still feel like they're part of the community. And this is the biggest thing the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do. He used to allow everybody to feel like he was part of a community. And even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Mu'adh ibn Jabal, before he went to Yemen, he gave him a nasiha. He gave him, and we know this hadith, اتق الله حيثما كنت وأتبع السيئة الحسنة تمحها وخالق الناس بخلق حسن. That he tells him, Ya Mu'adh, fear Allah wherever you may be, and follow up a bad sin with a good deed, and it will erase it. وَأَتْبِعْ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ وَخَالِقِ النَّاسَ, and treat all people with kindness, with good manners, right? Because this hadith is actually broken down to three. Which means what? Fear Allah. This is the relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How is your manners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are you righteous with the people here just as you are righteous with the people in your family? With your neighbors? With your family members? With your wife? Right? Well, maybe more influence in Arab here, but are you good with your families? Are you good with your parents? Oftentimes in this period, during this college period, a phone call comes from your mother and you're so quick to, decline that phone call, right? Or you're so quick to, I'm too busy, I'm with friends, mom. Can you leave me alone? I'm in college now, right? This is the mindset that a college person has. But subhanAllah, even after proclamation of faith, came the rights of your parents. وَقَالَ رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you not to worship anybody but Him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. That you treat your parents with respect. SubhanAllah, there are people, who no longer even have their parents alive, and they wish just to have them in their face, just to please them, just to have them in front of them, just one more day, just one more hour, to seek their wisdom, right? Because your parents are those people who are going to love you regardless of anything. Friends may leave you, everybody may leave you, but your parents will always love you. And so this is, again, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and people in your life, right? Or people in your lives. Again, the publicly and your private image should be the same. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that we will not be perfect all the time. And that's why He gives us an option to make istighfar. That's why He gives us an option to, if we ever wrong somebody, if we ever wrong ourselves, if we ever commit a sin, that He allows the opportunity to perform a good deed, because then it will erase that bad sin. And treat all people with respect. Treat all people with kindness. Regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion. This is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like we said in the beginning of the khutbah, O people, we have created you from male and female, and we gathered you to know one another, from tribes and nations. Right? Even the last khutbah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam broke down all stereotypes of discrimination. He even said that there is no difference between a man who speaks Arabic and doesn't speak Arabic, a man who's black and white. These things don't matter. What is the biggest thing that matters? Illa taqwa, right? Except for the faith, except for your God consciousness. How close are you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? With your dealings, with your interpersonal dealings. I leave you inshallah with one ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Yasin, He says, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُم. That it is we who create life from death, and we write down what we bring forth, so that the deeds that we perform in this world, it will be brought upon us, right? And what they leave behind. And we write down what they leave behind. I ask each and every single one of you, with manners in mind, what have you left behind, and what is your goal to leave behind in this dunya? Right? What is your footprint in this dunya? Don't be like just any other person. You can become an influence in your own personal life. You don't have to become an influencer with 1 million followers. You don't. You can be an influencer within your own realm, within your own friends, within your own neighbors. The Prophet used to speak about neighbors so much and to treat your neighbors with so much kindness that the companions thought it was going to be an obligation, like Silat al-Rahim, like the tying the kinship of family, almost to the point, right? So how are you with your neighbors? Winter season is coming. Maybe the snow is going to come, right? Are you shoveling your snow? On the news one day, the anchor said, if you have a Muslim neighbor, understand that you have the best kind of neighbor, right? Because they're good to you. We are a nation, we are an ummah of uprightness, of righteousness. And so I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we take that we hear the words and we implement the best of those words. إني داعٍ فأمين وأنا going to make dua. Please say Ameen. اللهم اهدنا بفضلك فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا برحمتك شر ما قضيت فإنك سبحانك تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من عاديت تبارك ربنا وتعاليت فلك الحمد على ما قضيت نستغفرك اللهم من كل ذنب ونتوب إليك ونؤمن ونتوكل عليك أنت الغني ونحن الفقراء إليك أنت القوي ونحن الضعفاء إليك اللهم كما جمعتنا في هذا المكان المبارك تجمعنا في الفردوس الأعلى مع النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، واسقنا به شرفا لا نطمع بعدها أبدا يا أكرم الأكرمين. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين، سبحانك رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين، الحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح، قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله، فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء، والله على كل شيء قدير. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون، كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله، لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله، وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله